Let's get straight to it, because this story is too wild to ease into. A close friend of Prince Harry and Meghan has publicly blasted the royal family for paying shockingly low rent on luxury homes, and it has flipped the usual narrative on its head. For years, Harry and Meghan have been dragged for how they fund their life in California, but now the spotlight is on the palace itself, and the numbers coming out of these royal housing deals have people doing double takes. While the Sussexes are paying full market costs in Montecito, parts of the royal family appear to be enjoying massive estates for what looks like symbolic, almost ceremonial rent. This all kicked off when a journalist with close ties to the Sussex circle wrote a column calling out what she described as tiny rental agreements tied to Crown estate properties. Her argument was blunt. If ordinary people are struggling to pay rent and mortgages, why are some royals paying what looks like pocket change to live in grand properties that most people will never even be allowed to drive past? Suddenly, the question wasn't about how much Harry and Meghan spend. It was about how little others seemed to. What really poured fuel on the fire was the involvement of Parliament's public spending watchdog. After an official royal estate report, lawmakers began looking more closely at the lease arrangements for certain royal homes. One example that caused a stir was a property linked to Prince William and Princess Kate. While officials insisted the rent was set at market level, the structure of the lease told a more complicated story. The deal reportedly involved two layers of rent. One was a fixed amount of around $700 a year. The other was a slightly higher figure that increased over time and averaged out to a little over $2,000 annually. For a country lodge tied to the future king, that price tag sounded more like a joke than a fair deal to a lot of people. The columnist who brought this to public attention didn't soften her tone. She argued that it felt petty and outdated, especially at a time when some working royals appear to take on fewer public duties while still benefiting from public money, security and housing. She compared this to Harry and Meghan, who walked away from the system and now rely entirely on their own income to support their lifestyle. In her view, there is something refreshing about actually paying your own way, even if that means taking criticism and weathering public storms. She also dragged Prince Andrew's housing situation back into the light. According to long-standing reports, he has been allowed to stay in a lavish royal property while paying what is known as peppercorn rent, which in legal language means a symbolic amount that technically counts as payment, but in reality means almost nothing. The contrast was sharp. One part of the family paying near nothing to stay in palace-level comfort, another part paying full private market rates and still being told they are wasteful. Now, here's where things get both complicated and quietly hilarious. The Crown estate system is ancient. It is packed with rules written in a time when people travelled by horse and argued by candlelight. These properties are not owned like normal homes. They sit in a grey area where the monarchy technically surrenders profits to the state in exchange for funding through the sovereign grant. In return, certain royals are given access to homes that are tied to their roles. That's the theory. In practice, it looks like a very fancy version of rent control that has never been updated. Some of these rent agreements stretch back decades. They were written when the world was different and when public accountability worked very differently. In those days, nobody was doing viral breakdowns of royal spending on social media. There were no 20-year-olds on TikTok explaining constitutional law in 60 seconds with background music and captions. The system survived on distance and mystery, not transparency and spreadsheets. But the world has changed. People now want numbers. They want clarity. They want to know why their taxes help maintain certain properties while the people living in them contribute sums that look more like a legal loophole than a fair deal. That's why this story hit such a nerve. It isn't just about money, it's about the gap between tradition and modern expectations. And then there's the Sussex factor. Harry and Meghan are living proof that you can step away from the royal machine and survive. They built careers through media, partnerships, and content production. They didn't inherit that world. They had to negotiate it. They had to risk failure. They had to take hits in the press. They pay for their own security. They pay for their staff. They pay California property costs. And if you've ever seen housing prices in that part of the world, you know that is not a life for the budget-conscious. Yet, despite all of that, the narrative often paints them as greedy, opportunistic, or wasteful. This new angle flips that story on its head. Instead of asking how they can afford their life, the real question becomes why some others are not expected to. There's also something darkly funny about the idea of a peppercorn rent. Imagine showing up to your landlord with an actual peppercorn and saying, "Here you go, see you next year." Somewhere in London, a buy-to-let investor just screamed into a throw pillow. The absurdity of it all is part of why people are so hooked on this story. But make no mistake, this is serious territory for the monarchy. Public support is not guaranteed. It is earned and maintained through relevance, fairness, and a sense that the system is not completely disconnected from reality. When housing deals look like insider perks rather than justified arrangements, it chips away at that trust. What's likely to happen next is not a dramatic palace showdown. It will be slow, careful, and wrapped in official language. Committees will ask for more data, reports will be drafted, statements will be issued that say a lot without really saying anything. And gradually, some small changes might be made, or at least some numbers might become clearer. That is how institutions protect themselves. They adjust quietly, not loudly. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan will keep doing what they have been doing, producing projects, signing deals, raising their children outside the direct pressure of royal duty. Whether people love them or hate them, they are living in a system where they sink or swim based on their own efforts, not symbolic leases or inherited housing perks. This entire saga really comes down to two visions of what it means to be royal in the modern world. One vision says tradition matters more than market logic, and that historical arrangements should be respected. The other vision says if you want public respect, you should live by rules the public recognizes as fair. The tension between those two visions is not going anywhere, and this is why stories like this keep landing. They sit at the crossroads of money, power, tradition, and public patience. They are about more than houses and rent. They are about whether the monarchy can evolve fast enough to keep up with the world watching it. If you enjoyed this deep dive into royal drama with a dose of humour and reality, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what we drop next. It costs you nothing, but it helps the channel grow more than you probably realise. If you want to go the extra mile, you can buy me a coffee or use the Super Thanks feature below. It directly supports the channel and helps us keep producing this kind of content consistently. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think royals should pay full market rent? Or do you think historic agreements are part of the magic that keeps the monarchy unique? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because your opinions matter more than palace press releases. Thank you for watching and supporting the Sussex Squad. Hit subscribe, support through Super Thanks, buy me a coffee if you can, and help this channel grow. I'll see you in the next one.